So Tanya and I have slightly different backgrounds, social science and humanities, but we'd love to just tell you a quick 3 to 4 minute encapsulation of sort of our journeys and what prompted our decision to get into academia and then back out of academia at the back end, and how we sort of did that. We'll also talk a little bit about what our firm, Silver Linnet, does, and go through sort of an example project that we worked on together recently to sort of talk you through the kinds of work we do in a little more detail. And then at the end, we have, we know you'll probably get a lot of advice, but we have a little bit of advice / things that worked for us in terms of figuring out where we wanted to go and how to make that happen from the PhD program into the consulting world.
And because what we do at Silver Linnet is just pretty broad, there's lots of different components to it. It's a little, I usually have trouble explaining what I do to people. We're also going to go through kind of in-depth a project where Jen and I both worked together in helping an orchestra better understand its audience and think of new ways to have fun, exciting programs in the future. So it'll be a number of fun things to cover in our talk.
Yes. So I'll dive in. My background, I have undergraduate degrees in international business, French, and marketing, and I really wanted to go work for like the UN as an undergrad. And there's a theme through my experience of wanting to do something, trying it, and then shifting to doing something else, right? So that's one of my biggest pieces of advice, is to try out what you want to do in whatever ways you can. So after I finished my undergraduate program, decided, actually, I worked for business for a little while and decided I don't want that sort of profit, I don't want that to be my final end-all be-all, right? That a lot of businesses have that as the ultimate goal. And so I decided to go back and get a master's in public administration and wanted to run a nonprofit agency for social services. And I thought that would be amazing, right? Like, there's a higher goal that I can feel really good about and be excited about going to work every day. So I got this master's degree and I really enjoyed it, but then I went and worked for a nonprofit for a couple of years and saw the intense people management that happens at the executive director level between the board and the staff and the executive director and all the fundraising. And I thought, oh my gosh, that is not for me. I cannot do that. That's just not where my skill set lies. And I was lucky enough to be at the National Runaway Safe Line, which is here in Chicago. They're a free 1-800 service for kids who are thinking about running away, have any issues, or have actually run away. And they hook them up with services in their local areas across the country. And I thought, there's not much research about runaway youth. I would love to develop, try to make my organization a national leader and figure out what kinds of research we could use to advocate more effectively for these kids and get more resources for these kids. And my boss was flexible enough to let me really pursue that passion, even though it wasn't part of my direct job responsibilities there. They didn't have anyone doing that. And so I started to do that, and then I thought, I need more tools. I want to be looking at pretty complex questions about why do kids run away, what are the effects of that on their lives, and I need to learn more in order to do that. So I decided to go back and get a PhD at University of Illinois at Chicago, and public administration seemed like a place where I could learn a lot of those tools. I'm also interested in methodologies, and they have a survey research lab there, and so I thought it'd be great to be able to work there and learn a little bit about how to talk to people. So that's why I went back, and I continued to freelance and do those research studies for the National Runaway Safe Line. Every year they collect data about everybody who calls, and so I analyze that data and look for trends and help them understand how their audience is changing a little bit. So that's kind of my first audience research. And when I got out, I started looking, when I finished my PhD, when I'm starting to get closer to finishing my PhD, I was a little disillusioned with the long sort of lag between the actual research that I was working on and producing and anyone using it, or being aware that anyone needed it or was looking at it. And I got some of that through, doing a little more focused research for the National Runaway Safe Line that could be used more immediately, but I liked that piece. I liked being able to have people say, hey, we have this question, we want to know what our audience is, and be able to give them an answer and see them adapt and change and do something with that information, versus the sort of echo chamber that sometimes publishing can feel like. You put it out there and who knows, you might hear about someone using it or it might not get used at all. So I decided to look into consulting opportunities and have a personal interest for the arts, but no real background in it, but a strong background in methodologies and analysis techniques. And so I decided to start looking at those kinds of jobs. And we'll talk a little bit later about sort of strategies to use when you figure out, like, actually, maybe I want to take a different path. But I will stop talking, hand it over to Tanya.
That's great, because you'll be able to see some patterns in, maybe from the people we've already talked to, but also between Jen and I, in terms of how we, I think, drew other activities into our PhDs that turned out to be really important. Jen with the Runaway Hotline, and I can talk about some of the things that I did outside of my PhD to earn some extra money that have turned out to be really influential in how I've now have a career. So for me, I got an undergraduate degree in history and anthropology, kind of joint, and didn't know where I wanted to go. I found a really great PhD program at the University of Chicago, and was thinking about eventually being in a museum, and to work in a museum, you, as a curator, you do need a PhD. So I figured, I'm on the right path. This is gonna be not necessarily easy, but it seems fairly straight, and I know where I'm going. And I greatly enjoy all the activities and opportunities, because I worked in the NELC department at the University of Chicago. So that's not anthropology. It's a humanities department, it's a regional studies department. NELC is Near Eastern Language and Civilization. And so I got lots of chances to travel. But I also got chances to work in museums, and I wasn't feeling it again. It wasn't feeling like quite the right thing. Art museums were not quite what I was expecting, being an archaeology person where I like to dig things up and make meaning out of collections of things. So that kind of sounds like research, right? But as I was doing my PhD, I did things over the summers. I worked at the Erickson Institute here in Chicago that does educational research for grade school and middle school youth. And I worked at the Language Center at the university and helped with tech issues and helped with teaching pedagogy. And I worked for some family jobs and got business experience, all kind of around my PhD, mostly to make extra money. But as I was finishing it up, there was a point, you're probably at it as well because you're here, where I was like, I can't write another word of this stupid dissertation until I am making a salary. I need a job. And so I started looking around, slightly earlier than Jen, I think, because I wasn't done, but I just wasn't feeling good about waiting and waiting and waiting. And trying to find what I could do was hard, but just looking through Indeed.com and other places, I happened upon the term user experience, and I thought, oh my gosh, this could combine a lot of things that I've done if I can make a case that Islamic archaeology is applicable to these design and research fields. And so for me, I found a company in Evanston to start with called Centralis, and they took a risk taking me on and kind of training me in the methods of that type of research. Because I'd had the kind of the academic training and thinking and writing and speaking and teaching, I had an opportunity through them to kind of apply that in new ways. And from that, then, I've been able to transfer that back into the cultural sphere where I have, working with museums in a different capacity than I was expecting, but in a really rewarding way. And it has combined all these different skills and there's no way to anticipate that. It all happened because things built upon themselves, and I was open to be to have some connections out there and kind of see words that might be used in the corporate fields or in the design world that were similar to archaeology, and then having to practice making those speeches saying, here's why I think it's connected. Here's some examples, and we'll go into all of this, but that connection between Jen and I where things add up in ways that you don't expect can be really productive, and it can be a little bit agonizing for me. It was, but it did come to a great place. So that's the story for how we both got where we are. We'd love to share a little bit more about what we actually do now that we are here, so that you can see kind of firsthand the type of work that we do, the actual skills that we're using that have translated from our academic work. So at Slover Lynette, what we do is audience research. And audience research is the term that's a little bit difficult to explain, oftentimes I find, but we are trying to understand the people who attend different arts events, cultural events, educational institutions, science learning, so orchestras, theaters, museums, as Allison was saying, it's all across the board. We work with foundations as well to understand how art grants are making an impact in their communities. It really is broad, and it's an interesting niche because it's not something a lot of research and design firms do. I think when you're talking to a lot of other people during the couple weeks here, places like IDEO or just across the city, a lot of their work is largely corporate, and that's where that's where the news is, but we're bringing that into the cultural sector as well, and so that bringing research into the design of cultural institution strategies or actual programming or marketing campaigns, and we combine our research with some market research and some research about experiences, but it all fits together. I don't know, Jen, do you have additional stuff to add with what we do?
No, I think if we just walk through some of the tasks, it'll be clearer. Yeah.
Sounds good. Yeah, so these are the kind of high-level goals of what we do every day. So like none of these are what we're actually sitting at our desks working on, but this is what we strive for. So kind of at the top, what I often do is working on design through research. So that's strategic design, that program design, or evaluation of exhibits, or understanding, recently kind of going to Denver and understanding the Latino community in Denver in order to develop programming for the Latino community that makes sense and is meaningful. And a lot of that has to do with the word engagement. I think engagement is a word we really think about deeply and often in our jobs. What does it mean to be engaged? That's a lot different from a lot of firms in consulting on the corporate side, where you have a lot of clear signals for when something is successful or unsuccessful, depending on how much money it makes or how many people come through a website. Engagement is a really loose, rich term, and so we rely on research to understand how audiences understand their own engagement, how to help organizations with workshops so that they can define what they imagine engagement would be between their audiences and their programming. And so in the process of understanding about engagement, what comes out of that is organizations can help build their internal capacity in terms of kind of having a research process that continually lets them learn about engagement, understanding engagement better. They're understanding their current audiences, and that can help them get people to come more often and interact with them in deeper ways. And it's usually not about making money off of people. It's because we're working in the cultural field, we're so focused on how organizations can empower communities, bring new voices in, kind of equalize the cultural field so that there's participation from all sectors of society. A lot of that has to do with non-attenders, so learning about why people might not come to a particular organization can really help organizations figure out ways to adapt and change in the future so that they can be more relevant. A good case for this may be something like symphony orchestras, which are often very highly prestigious and do great work, have a lot of really highly engaged attenders, but it's a small proportion of, for example, like a city like Chicago. And so symphonies and other cultural organizations are always looking for ways to have deeper inroads into the patterns of a city or region's life.
And I think we see our role as helping push cultural organizations a little outside of their comfort zone of we're serving the same audiences, we're serving predominantly wealthy white individuals for a lot of these cultural organizations, and that's sort of across the board, symphonies, museums, and helping them think a little bit more broadly about how to bring in that community element, how to be more relevant to broader sets of communities. And I think they're at varying levels along that path. Some of them are really very advanced, and we're helping them just sort of implement their own ideas. Others we're sort of helping sort of show a little bit more why this might be useful to them. And we don't tend to work with the organizations that are pretty stuck in their current framework. At this point, our organization is about 15 years old, and so it's nice. We get to be a little bit choosier about really working with organizations that, to some extent, share our mindset about the importance of broadening culture and access to culture. So.
Yeah, yep. And as we're doing that kind of tough work of pushing these organizations to think differently, some of the skills that we're doing all the time are just kind of starting with the research. There's the humanities skills of just taking in information, doing interviews, understanding, observing, and kind of interpreting what we see going on at different events. There's also kind of some of the more, what would you call it, like statistical skills. So that may be things that in humanities are a little bit less, central to some of the work you're doing. It was less central for me, but that's something that can be learned, or Jen has a background that's really strong on the quantitative side. We bring the qualitative and the quantitative sides together in our types of research in order to evaluate existing programs, for example. And usually our work ends up doing all that analytical work and then coming out into a report that we present to our clients. Or we oftentimes don't end with a report. We continue our engagement with our clients through workshops, through multiple stages of research. So oftentimes we'll be working with clients for several years on a project. Some of them are shorter. Some can be, maybe the shortest is about 4 months. But a lot of our projects are kind of either ongoing or rolling and helping organizations build.
Especially our foundation work, that tends to be longer just because they have the funding to do more learning about sort of long-term effects. And so that can be really exciting to be able to be involved beyond just like we presented a report and they may or may not implement the recommendations, and they have their own internal issues that they have to reconcile. We don't know everything about the organization, so it's fine if they don't implement everything we've offered, but it is really great to be able to watch organizations across like 3 years and be involved at that longer time scale. We're working with the Irvine Foundation out in California right now for the New California Arts Fund, which granted $1 million to 10 organizations and across the cultural sector, and is really trying to understand how organizations can change in order to serve a broader, a community that looks more like California's demographic community. And so it's great to be able to see them sort of implement ideas. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, learn from them, and then adapt and learn from each other. There's a lot of sort of group learning as well. So that can be very fun to get that long-term learning.
Yeah, and that's quite different from working on a PhD alone. We're working very closely with each other on a lot of projects internally within our company, but also regularly working with teams in each of these organizations who we have fairly close relationships with. So it's a lot of that collaborative thinking that that is not always, at least for me, wasn't part of my academic degree. And so those outside jobs that I had really were important in giving me those skills that I could transfer to here. Okay.
So we thought we would walk through a recent project that Tanya and I worked together on. This is for a symphony client, and they developed I think, a really interesting new kind of experience for their users, for their visitors. So they partnered with local indie rock groups that were in the city, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or yeah. And they collaborated. So there'd be like a piece from the symphony and then a complementary piece from the indie rock group. And then they also play together?
Yeah.
Also played together.
It was a completely new piece that was composed for a specific event.
Mm-hmm.
So something that had never been seen before, kind of the opposite of classical music where it is such long-standing.
So they're trying to make
history.
it, so they're trying to make it more relevant by bringing in other kinds of music to this symphony experience, but also exposing people to the symphony. And then adding a bunch of wraparound experiences to make it more casual. They had drinks from local breweries and snacks and things out in the lobby to do, and tried to make it really a social kind of fun event. And the goal of this at sort of a high level was to bring in new people who aren't currently attending the symphony to understand whether or not this concert format might bring those people in the first place, but then also might maybe sort of be like a segue into their traditional programming. Like if they came and saw this, would they then come and see our other programming? And to try to figure out, are there things we need to do to improve that concert experience? Are there other elements, since you went, are there other elements of it that I haven't described?
Maybe the only thing I can think of is if, when you're hearing us describe this, maybe it doesn't sound that radical, because there's street festivals that do this kind of thing all the time. There's music performances that do this, but classical orchestras don't always do this. And so they have to negotiate how to satisfy their current audiences who like what they're doing, as well as branch out and bring new people in and kind of balance that so that they create one community. That's not the easiest thing. And so it's very different than just a street festival where everybody already is casual and wants to drink and the norms are all the same. We're dealing with multiple cultures coming together within this really interesting symphony microcosm.
Mm-hmm. We did a few other things, like there was open seating, so you could sit wherever you wanted. You didn't have to, if you met your friends there, you could all sit together. So really trying to foster a more social kind of experience. So we thought we would, oh yeah, sure.
Could you give us some indication of like the nuts and bolts of how you
Yeah.
do this?
Yes.
So, like, I want to know more about youth. Well, I'm not just going to go out on the street and say, hey, youth.
That is great. Actually, we're gonna ask you to tell us how you might answer these research questions.
We'll also tell you afterwards how we actually did it.
But I'm sure that I think maybe you won't be surprised, but I think there will be a lot that connects to what you do in terms of inquiry and your process. So understanding this target audience is younger people who aren't currently attending the symphony, and we want to understand their needs, their interests, their relationship to the orchestra currently. How would you assess that?
Maybe we can make. Oh, go for it. Go ahead. And we can draw that question in too, which is if we're saying what are people's values, so that can boil down to why might a young person be coming to this performance? What does it show about their values?
Mm-hmm.
It was here in Chicago?
It wasn't.
Okay. Oh, you're not saying where
They're still working on it, so we
okay.
can't. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
Although we probably have given you enough info. If you really wanted to know, I think you could find out. But
Earlier you talked about learning about non-attenders.
Mm-hmm.
So finding those communities of non-attenders, perhaps depending on the age group. It sounds like if there's beer involved and this indie rock band, maybe college-age students, so maybe mining local universities or community colleges, and finding people there who don't regularly attend the symphony and learning about those people and their values and what would it take to draw them to this event.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So at what point do you guys get involved? Are they like, hey, we had this idea for this programming, help us develop it? Or was it like, hey, we launched this programming, it occurred to us we might want to know if it's working and if we should, like, what it's working, so where
It's such a good question. Yeah, and it varies. Some organizations are very forward thinking. Sometimes grant-making institutions require that they pull in evaluation all the way along, and then they tend to be a little more deliberate. But often it's on the back end. Hey, we did this program. We'd love to know how it worked, which is harder, right? For this one, they did pull us in a little bit earlier in the process, which was great. So
Just
Tanya,
halfway through.
yes, not in the design phase. They had sort of designed what they wanted to do, but then brought us in.
And I think they had done one performance already, and so we were brought on in order to be part of the second performance, and then provide insight for additional performances in that season, but also to help them think about the following year, what they're going to do, and then maybe the following 5 years as well, what they're going to do. So they wanted different levels of feedback.
Right. So they also wanted to understand, how is this new concert format working, which is another question. If anybody has ideas about how to answer that, or how to improve the concert. Yeah.
I'm so interested in this work. My name's Doug. I'm from the Indiana University in Bloomington. Having worked as a public program director, evaluation is a huge part of the work. But I'm really interested in this notion of experience, right? So we're learning now in studies that experience can be looked to as affect and embodiment. So how do you measure with methods how things are embodied or have affect? Are there tools for doing that, or ideas around how to do that?
There are. There's many. Yeah, it's such a challenging question, and there are at some level, kind of measuring the things that I think you're talking about are things that I have done more in my academic career, and how we approach our consulting work maybe more at a practical level. We need to constrain what we're learning about, the embodiments of experiences to things that can help provide insight for future direction, whether that is like specific recommendations about changes or a design, or just a kind of strategic thinking. But there definitely are techniques for how we approach actually learning from audiences about what they value. That's like the hardest part of the work, I think, and that's the most engaging part of it. Any ideas about how you might actually do that? Yeah.
So I've produced a lot of theatrical performances, and a lot of times people have very specific opinions of things that the audience members are doing that they find annoying. And I've found it helpful to try to take those annoying things and say, well, how can we accommodate allowing people to do those annoying things, because they want to do those, and this is our audience. So a lot like texting, people say all the time, I hate it that people are texting in the theater. It's like, okay, well, how can we make it so people can text in the theater and not have it affect the audience, other people's experience, so that everybody can have the experience that they want to have. So like trying to figure out ways to accommodate things that people want to be doing in that space, so that they'll feel more comfortable coming into that space.
Yeah.
And we can sometimes have conflicts between how people want to experience cultural organizations in a very traditional way, like I want it to be quiet, there should be no clapping between movements and classical music, and it's very disruptive to some people if that happens, and being more inclusive and thinking about like how do we make space for that and make it feel more welcoming to people who don't have that background or tradition. I saw Hugh and then you. Okay.
Yeah, I'm wondering, and you don't have to speak specifically to this, but I would be interested in within the community institutions that already exist. So for instance, a cultural center that's already doing the work of teaching young people this specific genre of music, or a genre that's close to it. Because then there might be sort of like maybe a collaboration that could be fused. Because I know I work with young people a lot, and they're at the age where it's like about ego. They want the limelight. So if you can get some sort of setup where it's young people performing on the same or sharing the stage with the performance that's happening, then they will have their own following, and it might sort of lead to more of like a musical and cultural exchange rather than sort of them showing up as an audience. I know you're doing researching audience specifically, but what if there wasn't such a clear divide between performer and audience?
Yeah, and some of the work we do tries to blur that, make it more collaborative. Oh, low battery. Do we need to plug in? Uh-oh.
It's on the floor.
Oh, it's
fell
actually
off.
there.
Okay, yep, sorry.
Thank you, guys. That's important. Okay.
That's a great point. And it is a blurry line. It depends on the question that our client has. I think that's one thing that does differ. We are very client driven. The kinds of things that we can push them to look at like maybe a broader set of questions or different impacts, but ultimately it's what they need to get out of it that we focus on. So it can be a little frustrating when you have a broader question that you want to get at like that, and it's like, well, they're really interested in members. And that's important and helpful. And maybe we can get them to also look at non-attenders. But so we try to sort of make those incremental changes to push them. But yeah, that's a great point.
And I think for every project, everything we've brought up so far are things that we have as considerations. Can we incorporate non-attenders in our research to see how they would react to something that exists, learn from that? how can we get in depth in an experience to actually, be there and it's not just secondhand, really get some meaty learning out of that experience from the people who are there, from our own observations. And then also, what can we learn from people who may already be doing things? I think that's a large reason of why our company often gets hired, is because we've worked with so many different organizations in the past. So that gets brought in, and we have a sense of where somebody might be doing good work that another organization should learn from and not start from the beginning. So all of those are really, really, really critical to how we design research.
Yeah.
I was curious if the client had intended to have these performances or these activities or events to bring in new attendees and existing members who maybe want a more traditional quiet experience, or if these were designed to be separate events targeting new attendees. Like, were they trying to integrate that, or were they just trying to get at new people?
A lot of times organizations don't always know what they want.
And it's kind of a research question, right? Like, if we design this new experience we think appeals to the needs of people who aren't attending, will current attenders come? Will they hate it? Will they like it? Like, what will that look like? So that's one of the questions we answered. That's a great point. All right. Oh, one more, and then let's skip ahead. Yep. Oh, no, please.
So I was thinking about, something like Instagram, and so you could go to like a geotag of the orchestra and like get an idea of the profile of their clients, and then do it of, 5 venues that you think the indie audience would be going to, and then maybe 5 venues that you think are outside of that.
Interesting.
And then like compare and contrast those 3 bodies.
That's a great point.
Interesting that you mentioned that.
Yes. So we'll skip ahead. These are the multiple methods that we use, and we've kind of split them apart into the qualitative research and the quantitative. I think Tanya will tackle the qualitative. That's the part that she led, and then I'll talk about the quantitative.
Yeah, so you guys are right on track in terms of how we thought about what to get out of this experience. So it's really important that we had 2 phases here. As I'm sure all of you are aware, qualitative methods have different learnings than something that's quantitative. Qualitative, you can really understand motivations and why people are doing something, kind of the stories that come out of it, kind of insight that's really impactful based on hearing from people. Whereas quantitative, you can really measure and understand prevalence of certain views and preferences. And you can really bring those together if you're able to do something like a multi-stage research project. That's pretty common in our work. For the qualitative phase, we started off with a workshop because our clients didn't quite know what they wanted to get out of this program. They had started it and didn't have a sense of exactly who the audience might be. They were hoping to have some new audiences, but who would that be? And so we ended up thinking of ways to have a workshop where we went online on Google, got a bunch of images of different orchestras, different live music experiences, different kind of emotion images, put them all up on the wall, and asked the folks in this orchestra to imagine themselves being a young attender in the city and what kind of emotional experience they would want. So it's not even about the what is real out in the world, but it was getting skills of having people in an organization talk about their own goals in not just concrete ways where they might have very different opinions, but in kind of analogous ways, so you can find points where everybody agreed. And so some of the points we get into what they actually came up with.
And just a quick note, we often find that people who are doing programming and people who are doing marketing are sometimes work really well together, but are often a little at odds. Like, they feel like they're kind of telling each other what they need to do. So doing a workshop like this where we're crossing departments at the institution and different levels within the institution and really trying to get on the same page can be helpful in understanding what will success look like, what does this mean, and get everybody to buy into that collective idea.
And so from that, we're able to say, okay, these are their goals. They think that audiences are going to respond to the authenticity of the performers, both classical and non-classical. They think that the social elements is going to be important. But Well, I'm going to come back to it just first.
Oh, okay,
but,
okay,
but
sorry.
so
I
you
thought
know
you were
it's
going
here.
through the 5.
But those are really important. And once we had those hypotheses, we were able to do the actual research. And we had to think about how to accomplish that so that we could really get what the embodiment of the experience was. And so we did end up going to live music experiences that had nothing to do with this performance. We spent several days. It was me and another researcher. We did ethnography. And it was not your typical anthropological ethnography, but might extend over months. It was going to certain events and using some of those techniques that an ethnographer would use, but in a constrained way to get a sense of, well, what are people actually doing for what we did. Went to what kind of music did we went to? It was
I didn't go.
I know, but it was indie. It was all indie rock. We went to all sorts of indie rock concerts and saw people up at the stage pounding on the stage with their hands, or what they were doing in the crowd, and talking to people about how recently they had decided to come. And then we also went to the performance of this classical concert that included some elements of indie rock, and compared and contrasted to understand where those values were similar, where they were different. And in complement to the observational methods, we also did a number of kind of discussion groups with people who we recruited. We weren't able to work with community organizations because oftentimes there's time constraints. Instead, we worked with recruiters to find people for us who had certain characteristics, maybe young, never been to a classical performance before, and had them go, complete a journal as they did that, and then come to these discussion groups to talk about what they saw in those experiences and whether it was really different or really interesting. And it's another point of comparison. So all of these are different qualitative approaches that we combined in terms of the B and C, and then related those to that session A. And so as we were looking at before, there were 5 elements that we found were really important in terms of live music performance for both indie rock and this classical performance. And they weren't the same as what the team had hypothesized originally in this symphony. They were really interested in authenticity. They thought that the orchestra members are really authentic, but our indie rock musicians are going to be authentic. Well, of course, anybody who's an indie rock fan thinks that the music they love is authentic. So there were other values that this program could appeal to in the future that would really better relate to what people cared about that we met. And that's not where we ended. We then did more. I'll hand that over to Jen.
Yeah, so for the quantitative research, we wanted to understand current concert attenders, people who maybe have high potential to attend but who aren't currently attending. And so we did a survey of these people. And for people who aren't attending, we worked with a panel provider to do a few screening questions about some level of interest in music and age screening questions so that we're reaching that target audience, and then ask them about what do they want in live music experiences, what do they want in classical music experiences or indie rock experiences, and the kinds of elements of a concert that they're interested in. Is the social element really important? Is participation in the concert in some way important? Would they rather just sort of sit back and observe, or would they like to learn more about the process or the development of the product? A bunch of sort of different elements, and then tested those to see how important they were for different audiences. And we used a technique called psychographic segmentation to sort of pull apart the audiences, not on behavioral questions, but more on attitudinal questions. So based on the kinds of experience that they want to have, understanding what are the groups, what are they looking for, and how sizable are those groups within the current population. So if you want to skip ahead. So we looked across all orchestra audiences, so those who did attend, and there was one other group. So we looked at people who attended just a regular classical music performance at this organization, who attended the new format performance, and who hadn't attended at all. And broke those people up by the kinds of experiences they wanted, and we found that there were a few segments who really wanted new kinds of concert experiences. They wanted newness. They wanted unique opportunities. They wanted things they'd never seen before. They're really energized and excited by that element of novelty. Multidimensionalists were people who want to be able to sort of go to the lobby and do one thing and then go into the see some music and then come out and have a bite to eat and like have a whole sort of wraparound experience. That it's not just focused on the music for them. It's much more about, I want to be able to sort of partake of a bunch of different kinds of activities, and one of them is going to meet my needs. Maybe multiple ones will meet my needs, but they like having that variety and those options. The social and fun people, people are very motivated by the people that they're attending with. Like for them, it's more about, I'm going to go with my friend and have a good time, but it's not necessarily so important whether or not they can participate or if it's new or not. It's more about that social element. And then there were two segments of the audience who really preferred the more traditional kinds of concert experiences. And so we had traditionalists who were very much like, I don't want anything new. We sometimes call them they're kind of the old fogies. Like they want it the way it's always been, the best of the best. So they are not interested in any of these newfangled multidimensional kinds of things or any kinds of social opportunities. For them, it's very much about the quality of the music, and that's driving their interest and their participation. And then the other group is these special occasioners. So these are the people who go on their anniversary or their birthday, and they want it to be like a special night out. Like it feels special. They're going to dress up. So they don't necessarily want it to feel like a food truck rally or they really want it to be this high-end special experience, but it's only something that they would consider doing once, maybe twice a year. Most of them are coming less often than once a year. So for them, they want it to be sort of the old way, but they only want to nibble at that. It's not so much about the music, it's more about going for this special occasion. And so one of the questions that you asked so astutely was about how do attitudes and interests vary across audiences, and will sort of this general classical musical fan who's attending the symphony, will they be interested in this new kind of concert experience? And so then we broke it apart by behavior. So we looked at people who are going to the new concert format, and you can see that the social and fun, multidimensionalist, novelty seekers, that makes up a huge part of that audience who's going to this new kind of concert experience. The traditionalists and special occasioners, there's a few of them there. They're not super happy about being there, but they're trying it out. So there are still some that are crossing over from that general concert format that is more common. In the middle, we have the inclined non-attenders, and so for these people, it's kind of a mix. Social and fun, multidimensionalists, and novelty seekers is a little more than half, but there's a big chunk of special occasioners, too, who are interested in coming for a special event. They just haven't, the symphony hasn't risen to the top of that list yet for them, or recently for them. So that's a much bigger segment there. And then on the far right is the general orchestra attenders, and you can see that more than half of those are in that traditionalist or special occasioner category. But there are some multidimensionalists, especially as a sizable segment, and some in the novelty seekers. So from this analysis, as well as more in-depth analysis of the other survey questions that they looked at, what we said is that we don't think that it's very likely for people to move from the left side of this part, where they're going to the new concert format experience, over to the far right. That's a big jump. The kinds of experience that they want to have is really different from the kinds of experience that people going to a traditional concert want to have is. There's actually a little more room to go the other way, right? There are people within the general concert format who are going, but maybe it's not quite what they want. It doesn't really align with their interests. And so having this other concert format may actually draw some people away from the traditional concerts towards the more new format concerts, but in a way that leaves everyone more satisfied, right?
And we had one of our clients' hypotheses was, maybe all of these young regular concert attenders would love this new format. And we found that, that was definitely the case, but the story was bigger because it's really these novelty seekers who might be going to regular classical concerts who are really enjoying this new format. Mm-hmm. And so, looking at things from multiple ways was really helpful for them, because it's never just flat when thinking about how people work.
Yeah, so we sliced their data by behavior, by the kind of attender that they were, also by their age range, since that was a particular interest to the client, and then by these sort of attitudinal segments, and looked at them in different combinations to really understand what was happening. And so they, in terms of their goal for bringing in new, younger audiences, they were really successful. They brought in a lot of new, younger audiences. There was a little bit of a sub-goal to make those audiences more demographically diverse in terms of race and ethnicity, and that goal really fell flat. Their new concert format experience is actually less diverse attendance than their general concert programming. So that was an important thing to think about. Like, why is that the case? How could they engage other communities in a way that feels more relevant? So
that's where the ethnography came in, because we had all these comparative experiences with indie rock, and we're able to say, okay, well, those communities may not be as diverse either. In the fact that you're using indie rock as your bridge to increase interest in classical music may be having some effect there, and maybe there's other ways to explore other types of music. But then when you do that, you'll have to think about how different music communities interact, and that is different per music genre, as we were seeing in the ethnography. So we really were able to move back and forth from the quantitative research to what we learned from talking to people and seeing people, and that was the way of understanding both where, in terms of audiences, where opportunities were, but it also gave them really practical feedback about how can we just make this experience more fun and engaging for people who are already coming, and it attract more people through the experience itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we often will use that qualitative to understand, like, what questions should we be asking? What do these potential audiences even care about? And we have some ideas about what they might care about, but I think we're always careful to make sure that we're talking to people, because they always surprise us. Like, some things they care about are not what we would have expected or seen elsewhere. And then testing, like, what's the prevalence of that? How big are these audiences within, are these groups within current attenders and potential attenders? And then going back and contextualizing, why is this happening? Why are we finding that this is more important than this with the qualitative that we did earlier? So it's a really symbiotic relationship. Any questions about that? I think that's the end of our little chat about that particular project. Yeah, sure.
I have a more general question.
Mhm.
So what are the standards against which you judge a new opportunity, and have you ever had to turn something down?
Yeah, do you?
Oh, go for it. I can add to it, you say.
We turn proposals down all the time. We get sent RFPs directly from organizations, often organizations that we've worked with before or who have been recommended to us. And
requests for proposals.
Yeah,
I didn't know this term
proposals.
until being in this field. So.
Yeah, and so we just had one from the Detroit Institute of Arts. It's a really interesting community collaboration project. And so I think the metrics that we use vary. One is like how busy are we, and when does this project start, and could we fit it in? And do the team members who have the expertise to answer these questions, are they available? Do they have capacity? One is our sort of own internal revenue goals. Like, we need to book another $200,000 worth of revenue by the end of the year, and so we're a little more open to whatever comes our way in that. But I think we're also becoming much more deliberate about choosing projects where it's not so much just we want to understand who our donors are, and so that we can reach out and get more money from them. Like, that's not exciting, that's not so interesting and engaging. We're much more interested in pursuing projects that are community, connected to community or community driven, or about sort of trying new things and being more innovative.
Yeah, and that's one of the, that's where I think we get our own value from working in this sector. We're working with cultural organizations where we can say, let's try to, do your market divisions and understand that, but let's at the same time think about how communities are created, how art can be a force for equality, or talking about challenges and between ethnicity, or the different age groups or the different socioeconomic statuses that are going on in a city or in a region. A lot of our clients let us bring that in because they also have the same goals. So I think we try to have projects that do that, or have that mentality, and it's been increasing more and more within cultural organizations. So that helps us as a company.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, so many. Oh, over here. I haven't heard from you.
Yeah, I was just wondering in terms of post-research, thinking about how you did a project and how you reached out to people for that particular project, and the whole publicity aspect in terms of like how you reach a certain audience and how you can better it. Like, is there any thought given to that, or once the project is over, it's over and done?
Go ahead.
Oh, it just varies. The question of how best to reach out to people is often a component of our research. It just depends what clients are interested, whether that is just understanding their audience or whether it's starting to create those relationships with an audience. I'm working on a museum project where we're doing some initial research with Latino communities, but following our research, we'll be partnering with another agency that is going to be about developing those connections, explicitly working through community leaders, doing something called appreciative inquiry, where the community kind of facilitates its own research through family connections, friend connections, in order to help build on the research that we do as kind of a starting point. And actually, you guys are going to go to IDEO, I think, today, right? A lot of what we do would be at the front end of a lot of IDEO projects. We do a lot of first stage research, at least especially in what we're describing today. So what you're saying about actually reaching out to people, that comes directly after we do our work, and then it builds from there. Yeah.
Yeah.
You have explained about the surveys. I wonder about the people's willingness to answer those surveys and talk to you. Because I assume that certain audiences will just not want to give you that information.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. We tend to find that in-person interviews, people kind of like to tell you what they think and their opinions, and it feels like you're interrupting them and you might be a bother, but most people will talk with us if we're pretty genuine and authentic in our approach. Surveys, it's a little harder to do that. We always are playing around with our sort of intro invitation language to make it more conversational and try to make it more appealing and feel more important. But survey response rates are certainly down, and we're lucky if we're in the, depending on who it is, we're in the 10 to 30% response rate for surveys. And so that certainly brings in some possibility of error, that the people who respond are the ones who feel most strongly about the issue, and you sort of miss that middle group. But there's not a lot we can do other than combine it with other methods that might help sort of balance any particular error that we're bringing in via one method or another. So, great question. Yeah.
Kind of building off how you guys choose the projects that you work on. On the website it says that for ethnically specific audiences or non-English speakers, children's, that you guys reach out to those who have special credentials or specialists. So do you guys also work with outside consultants? And can you talk a little bit about how that process works?
Yeah, I think we,
there's just so many different ways we could do that, and we do a lot of that. We, for working with Latino audiences, I worked with 2 researchers who we collaborate with who are Latinas and are native speakers from with different backgrounds in, Central America. And so those collaborations on the side of who we do research with or who we partner with, like this agency that will draw on our work and take to the next step, that's one way we find kind of inroads to different communities. We also end up working with a lot of facilities and recruiters in various cities who have panels of people who are available to talk to. Because we're on a tight time frame, being able to quickly get access to people is a higher priority oftentimes than developing those deep connections that can take 6 months or longer, like in my research. And so we will work with the recruiter and provide some sort of incentive, like $100 to come in for an interview. Or if we're working with clients, we'll come draw from their lists of people who are attending, and a lot of times those folks are just really interested in helping because they care already. And so we can make inroads in a lot of different ways, and it just depends on the goals. If the goal of the project is for us to start helping an organization develop those relationships, recruiting somebody with a $100 incentive isn't the right method. But if the goal is to understand a starting point of where people are coming from, then that's gonna help do that really quickly. People are still very, very excited to help usually, because we're not asking them to like, help a ruthless corporation. They're helping an art org. So it really does kind of balance out.
And we do partner with people in multiple different roles. Sometimes is to help us with data collection, sometimes in more of an advisory capacity. We worked with Jessica Luke to help advise us on interviewing children ages like 3 to 5, how to understand what their experience looks like. We're not experts in that. So if an organization has a particular like audience population that we don't know a lot about, we don't hesitate to try to pull in outside experts and build that knowledge. Yeah.
That's a question all the way down.
Yep.
Oh, I actually wanted to know, so you're obviously using your academic skills and training, but I also want to know how much academic scholarship is being used in something like this. Like what kind of scholarship is being used, right?
Yeah, we do use it. It depends on the question. We certainly have a base of knowledge ourselves, and from being familiar with the academic literature, we use that sometimes to draw on without explicitly doing like a literature review in the area or turning to more academic scholarship. We sometimes will publish. We publish white papers, and we certainly refer to publications put out by foundations and journals. One of the co-owners of the firm was the editor of a journal recently in the field. So we try to stay pretty aligned with what's happening in the academic field. Sometimes a project will have a very explicit like field scan that includes academic journal articles. So understanding, for example, how to define engagement was one where we really looked to the field to understand how people defined it in the past. It turns out in very squishy ways. Like it's most of the work out there is about how to do it better, not about what it is or what it looks like. So I think it's a resource that we turn to a lot, but we don't get the opportunity to do as much sort of direct publishing in academia as we might be used to.
And I'll add real quick, because I don't use my Islamic archaeological academic repository at all. And I have found that there are some academic studies that have been useful in terms of this kind of work that we do here, but I've also discovered that there's quite large repositories of consulting reports. So it's different than academic research, but it's a body of shared knowledge, especially between cultural organizations. A lot of them are open with sharing their data with kind of globally, and so we've relied on that as well in order to see, for orchestras, there's been a number of pretty robust studies. They're still shorter than would be academic, and they're not necessarily publishable. They're PowerPoints that have been presented to give guidance to a specific organization. And we'll peruse those and see what lessons we can draw from that as well. I like that, so. There's so many hands.
I know.
I have two kind of origin story questions. So one, how did Slover Lynette get started? Was it like one or two ethnographers who jumped ship from academia and started this firm? And how long did it take for cultural institutions to recognize that this was a valuable service and for the company to get regular contracts? And then two, Tanya, you mentioned at the beginning that you started out with Centralis and you sort of convinced them that your work as a Islamic archaeologist had commonalities with US or user experience. And I'm just curious about the sort of concrete act of translation.
Yeah, I can talk about Slover Lynette if you wanted. So their origin story is kind of interesting. The people who own it's a husband and wife team, and it started with the wife who has a background actually in corporate marketing, and she decided she wanted to leave and have kids, and was mostly focused on marketing, and her first client was University of Chicago's Booth Business School actually, and started doing consulting for her. Her husband is much more in the arts and cultural sector, in terms of his past experience, and was really interested in sort of combining both academic kinds of research in terms of the client, as well as sort of arts and cultural clients. And they actually landed the Art Institute of Chicago very early on, and that as a client, and that sort of opened the door to the arts and cultural world. So I would say for them as well, this is a path that has not been sort of smooth or like clearly defined. They ended up selling off the academic client side of our practice about 4 or 5 years ago to Huron Consulting, and so there are a few of former Slover Linnetters who were there. And so now we focus exclusively on arts and culture. And it took a while to become known in the field. I would say I've only been with the firm for 2 years, but from hearing people talk about it, it's only in the last maybe 4 or 5 years where the word of mouth sort of precedes us in a lot of ways. And our reputation is such that we're able to start picking and choosing among clients based more on our interest and sort of personal fulfillment in the kinds of work that we're doing, rather than we have to book, X amount of dollars by this year in order to keep the doors open. So that's a good, 8 or 10 years where it was really more like accepting all that they got that walked through the door and, trying to shape their reputation based on that.
I'd say it's kind of hard to be a freelancer in this field and to get into working with cultural organizations. I think I've seen that a lot of museums and other organizations develop relationships. There's a lot of trust, which means that once you work with somebody once, they'll work with you again and again, but it's harder for others to work outside this field. So it's sometimes, if you want to go in this direction, attaching yourself to people who already work in this area is really important. And I'll just real quick add the transitioned in convincing others that Islamic archaeology was applicable. I think that having a PhD is kind of a two-edged sword for me. There's this automatic sense, okay, yeah, you're competent, you can concentrate, you can accomplish things, you're an independent worker, you can write. But at the same time, it might be, you're too obtuse, you might not be able to communicate well. So what bridged that gap for me was having a portfolio. A lot of these design fields want portfolios, and I was able to use PowerPoints that I had created for some university classes. So this is not like a normal portfolio that somebody would have, but PowerPoints were big. Any sort of projects where I worked with others for a class, and some humanities classes that do that. I know anthropological classes did that, and I did an anthropology in museums, and so had PowerPoints for that. And then from my jobs, I had worked with a database and helped with some database numbers, and so showing those quantitative skills through something that was not about research, but it's just part of the jobs I'd done. Any visualization, and also writing samples are really important, and writing not just for academic papers, but PowerPoints. Like that fear where you're going to be too obtuse definitely was there. So that it needed to be shown through examples that I could be both academic and have more. That helped.
Yes, you've had your hand up for a while.
Hi, thank you.
Hi.
So this question is about ethnography in a consulting context. And I'm an ethnographer in training, and a lot of, not all of it, but a lot of the discussions are focused on, ethnography in an academic context. It's a lot on identity and location, the dilemmas of subjectivity and objectivity. And I imagine within a consulting context, those things are not huge battles where people lose sleep over. So I was asking for, do you have any general advice for an ethnographer in training? But then who is interested in working within a context of consulting?
Yeah, what was most challenging for me was doing ethnography as a group, where you're encouraging clients to be involved in ethnography when when they're afraid to talk to people, whether that's because it's people from different backgrounds or just because they don't know how to start. So it's training people as well as doing it yourself. Working with other ethnographers, usually we have work in teams, so figuring out not just how to create your own kind of recording system and understanding what you learn, but how to work with others to see how you saw different things and create some sort of meaning out of that is really important. That helps with the time frame being so much shorter too. But the collaborative ethnography I found is really different from academic approaches.
In the social sciences, that is typically the norm, but you just described. It's just interesting. The humanities is where, we go out into the field and stay there forever and do this.
Exactly. Exactly.
It's often much more truncated as well, we have 3 days here to learn everything. But it's good. I just pulled this slide up because it has some of the other kinds of skills that we found have transferred best and that we've been able to talk up in terms of looking for consulting work and selling ourselves to consultants as people who can sort of step into that role easily and move forward. Writing skills is huge, and Tanya talked a little bit about that. Writing samples, even if it doesn't feel directly applicable, like if they can get a look at the way that you write, that can be really helpful. And understanding that you might be able to write for different audiences is key too, like not just that academic audience and voice. That voice has been hard for me to lose, but it's important to have different voices for different audiences. Actionable insights is great. And then experience in research methodologies, both the quantitative and the qualitative, are really key. Most of the people that we work with have sort of a focus in one, but also do the other. We're not siloed in terms of you only do quant or you only do qual, which is also nice. You're always building your skill sets. Sometimes if there's a quick project, you might get assigned into the place where you have the most expertise, but sometimes you're also sort of training somebody or bringing someone along with you, which is fun. Presentation skills, if you teach at your institutions, being able to be comfortable talking in front of a group of people, or sometimes talking to boards of these client organizations or the people running them. And for these big Carnegie Hall and big organizations, that can feel intimidating. It helps to just be familiar with getting in front of people and talking. And students are a great place to to learn that skill with its low risk.
And also I think that that leveraging teaching, you can do that maybe. It's more direct than I imagined, because what we do is we share knowledge with people who don't know what's out there. They aren't sure how to think about it. They aren't sure how to frame things. And so we have to translate kind of expertise to a beginning level and bring people along with us. And that's just teaching. So any teaching experience is going to be really, really similar to what I do weekly.
And then I have one more slide. Oop. Yes. Just general things that worked for us. So if you're interested in this kind of work, connect with us on LinkedIn. We're often looking for people to do field work across the country with us or to partner with. Take classes on statistics and research methods. I took one on hierarchical linear modeling that felt like it was outside of what I needed, but it has actually been really useful. So if you have the bandwidth to take additional classes, even if they're not directly applicable.
I'll add to that too, because I took some Coursera courses. They have survey design on Coursera. Mm-hmm. That's really going to help for a lot of jobs. There are books on, if you just look, user experience interview techniques, you're going to get a really good sense of how to do things that you learn over years in academia, kind of condensed in a corporate environment. You'll learn interviews, leading focus groups. Those are really translatable to a lot of different jobs. And those books and online courses are really readily available because a lot of people want this stuff, but you're going to have the extra edge if you have a PhD and you have this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Getting to know the field. If there's something you think you might enjoy doing, send an email and ask, hey, can we do a half-hour phone conversation? I'd love to learn more about what you do and how you got there. We do them, I do them maybe once every 2 weeks, an information interview with people in all kinds of backgrounds who think, hey, I might want to do what you do.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
I do a lot. I really love them, so I do a lot of them. Network at conferences. We have both sort of cultural specific conferences and methodology specific conferences that we attend. There may be local organizations. The Chicago Cultural Organization Research Network is a great one here in Chicago that's on Facebook that you can go to. It's once a month. It's people from all kinds of backgrounds that are great to connect with. Try it out, see if you like it, and then...
And I'm going to say that I found that extremely important. Short-term jobs are so easy within academia. You can choose not to do it and relax. But if you get a short-term job, that was where I found the things that I didn't know were out there. And and it wasn't a huge commitment, and it has paid off in ways I didn't expect. So I'm still reaching back to oh, I did this 5 years ago, but it shows that I have this knowledge that you didn't think I had. So It was big.
And then if you decide, academia is really not for me, shifting your focus as early as you can from the sort of looking for lots of publishing so that you're marketable in an academic sense, or seeking a postdoc, to more focus on getting done faster, and so you can sort of negotiate that. We have one colleague who figured it out pretty early and really shifted sort of gears and tracks in order to reach her goal of not working in academia but still being very fulfilled. So I know we went right up until our time. You guys have been so much fun to talk to. Is that it? Do we have time for any more questions, or do we need to go ahead and? Okay, sure. Yep.
Thank you very much, everybody.